All right, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're doing a bit of time travel, and we're heading right into the thick of it. I want you to literally picture this. It's the sweltering, dusty heat of August 1947. You're sitting in a quiet, closed-off room in Delhi, totally isolated from the chaos outside. We're about to dive deep into the monumental, often heartbreaking, and incredibly transformative events that literally forged modern South Asia.
200 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering number of people whose homes, lives, and entire destinies were just thrown into absolute chaos by one single man sitting in that closed room with a pencil. He drew a line on a map and in an instant abruptly displaced 200 million human beings. It's a scale of displacement that's honestly almost impossible to wrap your head around. So let's get into section 1, the man with a pencil. Okay, so it's June 3rd, 1947, and Lord Louis Mountbatten, the last viceroy, makes a sudden announcement. The British are leaving, and they're leaving fast, mostly because they're terrified of a volcanic eruption of violence. But man, the mistrust was incredibly deep right out of the gate. They couldn't even agree on what to call these new nations. Muhammad Ali Jinnah demanded the countries be named Pakistan and Hindustan, which together would make up India. But Jawaharlal Nehru, he wasn't having it. He argued that India had held its name for centuries, so why change it just because a peace was breaking off? Mountbatten actually sided with Nehru on this, which deeply upset Jinnah. This utter lack of trust is exactly why the British felt they had to bring in an outsider to draw the actual border. So who do they pick? Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a brilliant London lawyer who had literally never stepped foot in India, had zero biases, and honestly had no idea where the places he was dividing even were.
And the bureaucracy of splitting an entire country in half, it was absolutely absurd. They weren't just dividing land, you guys. They were dividing everything. I'm talking typewriters, library books, even soap cases. But the most ridiculous example has to be the ducks. Yes, ducks. 60 of them had been ordered from England back in 1946. By July 1947, they show up in Calcutta with a 250-pound bill attached. But nobody knew who owned them. Did they belong to West Bengal in India or East Bengal in Pakistan? It's kind of surreal. And while those ducks just sat there in limbo, Sir Cyril Radcliffe actually refused his 2,000-pound fee for drawing the border, saying he was simply doing his duty.
Moving on to section 2, a line drawn in blood. When Radcliffe's secret boundary lines were finally revealed to the public on August 17th, which, by the way, was 2 days after they'd already celebrated independence, the human toll was just horrific. The violence peaked with what became known as the ghost trains. The No 10 Downing Express rolled into the Amritsar railway station from Lahore in total, terrifying silence. When the doors opened, there wasn't a single living passenger inside, only corpses. And scrawled in huge letters on the blood-soaked walls was this absolutely haunting message: "This train is our independence gift to Nehru and Patel." And the real tragedy? This nightmare was playing out in both directions. The sheer volume of humanity caught in this trap was totally unprecedented. The Radcliffe line effectively stranded 5 million Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistani Punjab and another 5 million Muslims in Indian Punjab. Overnight, they were turned into refugees. We're talking about desperate, dusty columns of people trekking on foot that stretched 50 miles long. Now, the government had put together a Punjab boundary force of 55,000 soldiers to try and keep the peace, but against 10 million terrified, displaced, and angry people, they were entirely helpless. Which brings us to section 3, the miracle of Calcutta. So, while the Punjab region is completely burning, an even bigger nightmare is looming over the incredibly congested bazaars and slums of Calcutta over in Bengal, and the military, they had zero troops left to stop it. Completely desperate, Mountbatten goes to Mahatma Gandhi and essentially asks him to perform a miracle. He asks him to be a one-man boundary force. Gandhi actually agrees and moves into this ruined, abandoned building called Haidari House, but he laid down 2 incredibly strict conditions for the controversial Muslim leader, Hussain Shahid Suhrawardy, who, mind you, was the very guy Hindus blamed for thousands of previous deaths. Condition 1, the Muslims of Noakhali had to officially pledge to protect Hindus. Condition 2, Suhrawardy had to live completely unarmed with Gandhi in that very house, facing down the angry mobs together. Predictably, violence did spark. So on September 1st, the 78-year-old Gandhi begins a fast unto death. Within a couple of days, he is dangerously weak. But then, the absolute unbelievable happens. On September 4th, 27 rioters literally come to his door, confess their crimes, and drop their weapons right at his feet.
Men who had been hunting each other down just days prior were suddenly standing guard outside each other's homes. After 73 hours, the fast was broken. Think about that. One unarmed, elderly man achieved what an entire army couldn't. And for the rest of Gandhi's life, Calcutta never saw another communal riot.
All right, let's pivot to Section 4, the Swiss cheese map.
Stepping back from the immediate human tragedy for a second, we have to look at the massive geopolitical puzzle the British left behind, because it was incredibly fragile. 565. That is exactly how many princely states existed in 1947. With the British gone, these states, which were ruled by absolute kings and nawabs, were technically free to just become their own independent countries. If they did that, India's map would literally have over 500 holes in it. It would look exactly like a slice of Swiss cheese. A modern nation simply could not survive like that. That takes us to Section 5, uniting the princely states. The monumental, ticking clock task of integrating these kings before that August 15th deadline fell squarely on Indian leader Sardar Patel and his brilliant right-hand civil servant V.P. Menon. Mountbatten came up with this strategy, saying they needed to gather the princely states up like a basket full of apples, basically securing all but maybe a half dozen of them. And the deal Patel and Menon offered was remarkably smart. They told the kings, look, if you join India, you get to keep your royal titles, your sprawling palaces, and your privy purses. You keep the prestige and the cash, but in exchange, you cede your political sovereignty. But man, it was not easy. These royals were facing the loss of absolute power, and the pushback was straight out of a movie. Take the young king of Jodhpur. He actually got caught secretly trying to cut a blank check deal with Jinnah so he could join Pakistan instead. When V.P. Menon finally cornered him in a room to sign the agreement with India, the king literally pulled out a mini pistol and put it right to Menon's head. Mountbatten himself actually had to step in and snatch the gun away just to get the deal done. Talk about high stakes.
And then you have the completely bizarre case of Junagadh. This place was ruled by a Muslim Nawab, but it was totally surrounded by Indian territory and had an 82% Hindu population. But you know what the Nawab's main priority was? His dogs. I'm totally serious. He owned 2,000 of them, and they each had private rooms and their own servants. His advisors got in his ear and terrified him, claiming the new India government was going to poison his precious dogs. So what does he do? He tries to join Pakistan. When Sardar Patel inevitably ordered the Indian army to surround Junagadh, the Nawab totally panicked, hopped on a plane to Karachi, and yes, he made absolutely sure to take his dogs with him. Ultimately, a plebiscite was held, and 91% of the people voted to officially join India. Finally, we hit Section 6, the battle for Kashmir.
So we arrive at the biggest, most dangerous apple that was still sitting outside that basket, Kashmir. Now, the situation here was the exact reverse of Junagadh. You had a Hindu Maharaja, Hari Singh, ruling over a heavily Muslim majority, and he stubbornly wanted Kashmir to just be its own independent country. To force his hand, Jinnah arranged for these fierce Pathan tribesmen to invade. On October 24th, boom, they blow up the Mahora power station, completely plunging the royal palace into darkness. The Maharaja panics and signs the instrument of accession to India on the 26th. Literally the next day, Indian Sikh soldiers land at Srinagar. But here's the crazy turning point. Those invaders could have easily captured the airport and stopped the Indian forces entirely. But they were fatally delayed. Why? Because they stopped in a town called Baramulla to brutally loot a convent, committing horrific atrocities against the nuns there. That massive tactical error gave the Indian army the time they needed to secure the airport and by November 8th, retake Baramulla. Now, making all of this even more incredibly complicated was the bizarrely intertwined nature of these militaries. When Jinnah realized he was losing his grip on Kashmir, he ordered the official Pakistani army to march in. But remember, both of these newly formed armies are still commanded by British officers. Jinnah's British commander-in-chief flat out refused to fight the other British officers who were commanding the Indian side. So Jinnah is backed into a corner and tries a desperate tactic. He disguises his official Pakistani soldiers as tribal invaders and sends them charging right against a defensive ring of 4,000 Indian troops armed with machine guns.
Eventually, India takes the whole matter to the United Nations. On January 1st, 1949, a ceasefire line was officially established, which we of course now know as the Line of Control. This line essentially just froze the armies exactly where they happened to be standing, leaving a portion of Kashmir occupied by Pakistan. And guys, this is exactly why understanding this history is absolutely crucial today. That hastily drawn ceasefire line, along with the massive integration of those 565 princely states and that original border drawn by a clueless man with a pencil, directly dictates the modern geopolitical landscape of South Asia. It cemented territorial disputes that are still intensely relevant and heavily contested in the 21st century. Which brings us to a really profound question that I want to leave you chewing on today. How do we reconcile the unimaginable human tragedy of partition, the millions upon millions displaced, the shattered lives, the rivers of blood, with the almost miraculous political integration that forged a modern, unified nation out of over 500 fragmented independent kingdoms? It is this incredible dichotomy of utter devastation and remarkable triumph that completely defines 1947. I hope this explainer has given you a much clearer, more structured understanding of this truly monumental era. Keep questioning, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me today.